Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello everybody, it's Dr. Gemma, and welcome to Cognitive, episode 102, which I can already tell you is going to be called Minervaspun, because I had a spinning epiphany today, thanks to our own favorite black cat. And remember, today is October 31st, Halloween 2022. It is 5:48 p.m. We still have daylight, but of course, those of you of Celtic extraction, such as myself, remember, be careful. The veil between the worlds is thin. Once the sun goes down, we are not in the old year, and we are not yet in the new year until sunrise. So if you go walking in a cemetery, I'm promising you, you're going to get sucked into the other world. So, guys, just sit home by your fires, drink some soothing tea, and listen to a good podcast. I'd also personally like to thank Professor Patrick Ford, who taught me that cool stuff years ago at Stanford. I believe he's now retired from Harvard. Please remember that I live for your comments. I really do enjoy them, seriously. And you can comment on our group on Ravelry or at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com with that K stuck in the middle of cognitive to make our secret password. Okay, I'd like to point out that I am not adding followers to any of my social media accounts because I have been so spammed by bogus hacking accounts, so I can't tell who's real and who's not. So unless you can prove that you're real to me, no, sorry. It's not easy to do. And I'm really sorry because, again, this is what hackers have done to our world. But you can get me feedback on our Ravelry group or, as I have said, at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com. We can be in touch, as several faithful people have shown me this week. For example, I'd like to thank everybody who sent their best wishes for my husband's eyeballs that keep exploding. They're doing fine. He's doing well. He's still taking meds for it, but everything looks good, quite literally. In the meantime, Chris, yes, hang in there. Best of luck. And I hope you feel at the top of your game soon, because our buddy Chris has a few things weighing her down right now. And I hope you feel better. Karen, oh my gosh, that wasn't a cup of coffee. That wasn't a pint of coffee. You sent me a gallon of coffee. Thank you. I appreciate the donation. That was more than generous. I really do appreciate it. I really do. That donation's going to keep the podcast up and running for a while, let me tell you. So thank you. I try not to ask for the donations, but it's that time of year. The taxes, the Christmas, the husband staying in a hotel for a month with the son. Good heavens. So thank you. That was very, very generous of you, and I greatly appreciate it. Let's see what else. Well, you know what I'm going to say about COVID, right? Get vaccinated. That's all I can say. Just get vaccinated. I noticed the CDC has an information campaign where they're saying, hey, look, get it once a year. I don't know. I'm getting it every 6 months if I can help it. Every time a new variant comes out, I'm like, yeah, I'll suck up another vaccine. What am I going to have? Too much immune system action? I'm willing to take that chance, let me tell you. I understand that some people cannot get vaccinated, and that's a very scary thing. And so at this point, I just think the vaccine has been proven. Now, I have to say, I think we're in the same place we are with flu shots, where there are variants every year, and they have to take a guess at which variant they're dosing you against, and they will guess wrong. I say this because this week Medscape said they think they may have missed with the latest new improved shot that's supposed to include variants. Again, please don't blame the medical researchers. These things have variants. They change from day to day. They don't want their kids getting COVID any more than you want to get COVID. So I'm sure those people aren't faking us out. I'm sure they're just doing their best in the face of a virus that mutates like the wind, from what I can tell. But remember to get everybody their shots. This also includes things like flu shots. If you're a little older, your shingles shot, your pneumonia vaccines, get all those babies. I have to say, I am not a fan of, oh, I'll give you the flu and the COVID shot on the same day. That to me is like crazy. I'm sure they know more than I do, those pharmacists, but no, I'm not doing that. I have to admit, I draw the line at that. I got my flu shot back in September and my COVID shot just recently. And the COVID shot, I think I got tired and a little achy and the arm hurt. Not the whole arm, just the injection site. That was it. Either I'm not getting an immune response anymore or my body has really adapted to this game. Either way, I'm getting the shots. Do as you will. I still have the link up for your California COVID record. Curiously, my shots are not updating to it. I'm not sure what's going on there. I sent them a question several weeks ago and they have not answered. In the meantime, you're saying, but Gemma, this is a knitting podcast. What are you talking about? Why, I'm going to talk about knitting, of course. Oh, happy days. What's on my hooks and needles? Believe it or not, I finished the Frankensocks 2022. In fact, even as I sit here, I am wearing them. As always, they are simply gorgeous. As always, how do you play this game? You go into all your leftover sock yarns. I mean, if you want to make DK weight socks, go into all your leftover DK weights, whatever you want to do. But I'm using up my old sock yarns. Find the yarn where you said, that looked so good on the skein and looks barfalicious as an entire sock. Find that one. And that's what you're going to use for the feet of your socks because they're going to be in your shoes. Hate them all you want. You don't have to look at them. In the meantime, you are going to need 7 other yarns to follow my recipe. And each of these yarns you only need to get an inch out of. That is 10 rows in my recipe. I always use size 2 American needles or US needles. I'm not even sure what that translates into in the metric sizes, but just so you know. And I always use a cast on of 64 stitches. My basic sock is 2 inches, top down, 2 inches of 1x1 rib, 5 inches of stockinette, then 2 half rows of waste yarn for an afterthought heel that goes in later. And then the foot, for me, for a size 9 foot, I use 5 3/4 inches after the waist yarn, because remember the heel will add some distance to that. Okay, so in Frankensocks terms, I assume first 1 inch equals 10 rows. This seems to be working for me. So we're doing a 7-inch leg. Top 2 inches, I use just 1 yarn. I don't change color in the middle of that, or that would take another color of yarn additionally. So the top 2 inches, 1x1 rib, using a yarn you have a little more of left over. And then after that, I do 5 stripes. Each stripe is a different color. Each stripe is 10 rows long. Top 2 inches in the 1x1 rib, that was 20 rows. Because again, I'm saying 10 rows per inch. Okay. So 5 stripes, all different colors. And 1-inch stripes, for me, that is a 10-row stripe. Now, look, guys, it's your socks. It's not my socks. So, I mean, if you're making these, you can use the same color twice. You can do whatever you can do or have to do with your leftovers. I have a bajillion little bits of leftover sock yarn. This time I was happy because on the feet of these socks, I actually did finish 1 skein of an ugly color, and I still have a whole lot of the ugly color. Anyway, I digress. Okay, so that's your 7-inch leg, a 2-inch stripe followed by 5 1-inch stripes. Then you do the 2 half rows of waist canvas, in other words, just on one side of the sock, half the stitches, 2 rows. I do them in stockinette. I find that the easiest to pick out. If you want to do them in garter, nobody will care. After that, we're on to the foot, the instep. I do 5 3/4 inches in a color I really don't like that much. before I do the toe decreases. When that is done, I go back, I run my needles in the colorway just outside the waste yarn. I run the needles through, I pick up 2 extra stitches on each side of the waste yarn. That's to make sure I don't get holes. Then I pick out the waste yarn, and then I just take my 8th color. I think that's right? 5, 6, 7, 8. In my 8th color, again, this is a smaller scrap, and I do an afterthought heel. I use the same pattern for the heel as I use for my toes. When I first am knitting on with this new color for the afterthought heel, I will do 2 complete rows all the way around before I start the decreases. That is to make sure that I have not done anything stupid or accidental or missed a stitch or anything when I was running my needles through to prepare to pick out the waste yarn. So that's the recipe, short and sweet. If you're a dedicated sock knitter, you didn't need all that, and I thank you for hanging in there with me. It's not as complicated as it might sound if you're not a dedicated sock knitter. I would always tell you, you should learn socks, and you should learn the way that works for you. So I used to do socks with a heel flap. Then I found the afterthought heel, and I never looked back. And I know there's a huge variety of heels you can insert for an afterthought. The one that works best for me is just the plain old toe decreases you use for the toe of the sock. So there you are. You can see the picture. Now this sock is pretty amazing because the first yarn that I used for the 2-inch 1x1 rib at the top was self-striping. The ugly yarn I used for the feet, self-striping. So these things came out with just a galaxy of wild, beautiful stripes, and I'm really, really happy with them. The question is, but Gemma, how do you do all those joints? I don't spit splice. All I do is the same kind of run the thread under the stitches I would do in any join in any knitted project. There is no special knot or skill. I just leave a generous end, and as I change colors, the first 3 stitches, I have both colors on the needle. So I'll do my first 3 stitches with both colors, and to me that's a way of weaving in your knitting yarn. And then I just stay with just the second color, the new color, and on I go. And at the end, yes, I go in and I weave in all those ends. I don't really mind weaving in ends. I have learned to do it very carefully. So there they are, the Frankensocks 2022 finished. They also are a new record for me, 11 days on the needles. I usually take a month to do socks. These things are amazing. They are so addictive. You just can't wait to see what they look like with the stripes. The feet of the socks are very boring, but again, since I did have an ugly self-striping yarn, the self-striping made the feet go fast too. So here it is, Halloween, and I am wearing my Frankensocks as we slowly slip between the worlds while the sun sets. I love Celtic mythology. In progress, the lane splitter skirt. Maybe now it'll get some love, you know. I actually would like to give it love. Today, though, was dedicated to ASL. I really worked my butt off. I haven't even finished my 1 crochet square of the day, which leads me to say the Don't Know Yet, which I really should be calling the Don't Know Yet blanket. On we go. I started doing heavy-duty math, and then I erased it. Let me look in my journal to see where I put that. I did an unfortunate edit on the show notes, so by the time you see them, I'll probably have it back in. Oh yeah, here we go. So on November 30th, I will have 334 blocks. On December 8th, I will have 342. 342 blocks gets me an 18 block by 19 block blanket, and that is way big enough. Now I'm a little ahead. I really suspect by December 1st I will have the squares completed. But I've been doing the math and sort of figure out when all the significant things hit. So today, for example, I have at least 304 squares. I think it's more like about 310 or 311. If I were doing 1 block per day, I will hit 325 on the 21st of November. And what is this? I've got a few other numbers in here. 18 squares is 324. So that would be November 20th. So an 18 by 18 block. But the 19 by 18 looks like it's going to be December 8th. So how's this all going to happen now that I've got all these blocks? I clipped together 19 of them, as I told you last episode. And I laid them on the bed. So size is great. We have done the size rough measurement, and the size is just looking terrific. 90, no, I've really lost the ability to speak tonight. 19 by 19 blocks is going to work just great. 18 by 19, I suspect, would work just great. Right now, I'm looking at the last few skeins of the yarn. I can see 4 skeins as I sit here. And that is making me think that, yes, I really am going to go to the 19 by 19. I really want to use this stuff up. But I have not really been saving a lot of it for seaming. So we're just going to see how that flies. In the meantime, the Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery, no love, but it is sitting at my feet hoping. Oh, the other thing I wanted to tell you was I am taking Romule off, so the time between Christmas and New Year's. And that was when I'm planning to get down to the seaming. I am looking at Romule as a knitting, breathing space, that I am just going to move from location to location with my needles in hand and do a lot of stuff. Hopefully I will get little stuff done like the Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery. I know you plan so much, but it's only 5 days. In the meantime, I am getting everything ready for Romule and seeing it as a time to finish up little stuff. The Wrapped in Tiny Chains, the Roomba ate it. Yes, it's true. The Roomba went into one of my project bags and yanked out that poor front panel I'm working on. Weirdly, there was no damage. The little hook I had holding the last loop in place so it couldn't be pulled out held. So I walked in the living room and got really mad at Minerva because there was my Roomba clearly stalled and I could see yarn hanging out from under it. And I thought, Minerva, what have you done? And she didn't do a darn thing. The Roomba just went into the bag. What can I tell you? So there's a picture of it. As you can see, it actually looks pretty okay. But hopefully that will spur me on because the Wrapped in Tiny Chains, I've done the big back piece. I've done one front panel. I'm on the second front panel. Those things are not hard. Then you do the sleeves, which are even smaller, I think, than the front panels. And you do patch pockets. So that's another thing. Why am I not working on this now? I'm really trying to take it easy on the crochet because crocheting makes my hands burn, which interferes with doing ASL. So Romule, I will be finished my class, so hopefully I will start just whizzing ahead on that. I keep thinking I should start another pair of socks. We haven't gotten anywhere on that. Meanwhile, the Lady Eleanor, I put in a picture of how far it has gone. I really just finished a row. I was trying to do a row a day, and that became impossible as I went back to work for the working week and am doing ASL. So no love there. I got like a half row done this week. I'm not worried about it because I have realized I took a good hard look at the pattern and said, this is a sweater. I mean, I'm using 1,200 yards. This is a sweater. And so I realized, like, rushing myself through it, actually a row a day would be about right to finish a sweater. Same amount of time. But there is no good rushing myself through it. And in fact, it's demented. But it's pretty. I am in the middle of my second skein, and I'm about to wind the third skein. I'm alternating color-coordinated skeins of Noro Corian. They are way out of date, so it's no use giving you the numbers because you can't get them at this point. Did you know Mr. Noro died? He did. He died a few weeks ago, I believe. Yeah, I know. Wow. I wonder what will happen now. It looks like they've just got a business now, so they probably have somebody else doing the color work. But wow. Rest in peace, Mr. Noro. Wow, we owe you a lot. My favorite resources, you can see my list of all the places I like to buy yarn. The only exception in it is the Knitting Tree near LAX. That is Los Angeles International Airport. Why? Never been there. I've been following them, I believe, since they opened, at least in their current incarnation, and they're fantastic. So I'm just going to recommend them. I need to add L'Atelier over on Ventura Boulevard, down by, I think it's Studio City. L'Atelier is pretty amazing too. High-end, very beautiful. Lex, if we get you down here, you and me, L'Atelier, we have to do it. Dizzy Blondes, I have spinning news. And it's sort of part of the whole Minerva thing this week. I was brushing Minerva, the little teeny tiny cat brush with really fine grid of needles. And guess what? Got all this soft fluff and finally said, oh, come on, you have to try. I am harvesting this at such a phenomenally slow rate. So don't be looking for anything soon. Additionally, it is in the grease. It is not cleaned up. I can see grit on it. For a cat who cleans herself, it's amazing how much goo is on her fur. This is her undercoat. It's extremely soft and fine. You know, I've spun human hair. I mean, you're going to spin everything. Particularly if you use a drop spindle, you're going to try everything. So I have. So, you know, this was inevitable that I kept looking at this as I brushed her and finally said, just do it. So I have it on one of my dear old spindles from Yorkie's Slave. And it is amazing how fine it comes out. This is charcoal work. This is really hard to do. I'm doing it on a drop spindle, which is basically like using a charcoal. That you can spin anything really short, really fine, as long as you're patient enough. This stuff is like cashmere. It's insanely soft. Will it hold up? I have no idea. It's very, very thin. It's very, very thread thin. Because really, if you didn't, you would get like a ½ inch out of every combful. So I'm spinning it very fine and hopefully we'll ply it. This is so fine it would need plying. And my guess is it would pill like crazy, but it also would be insanely soft. So you can see a picture of the Minervaspun on my drop spindle there. There's just, seriously, I don't think there's 4 inches of it because I just haven't brushed her enough. And we'll come back to that in Minerva's Last Word and possibly in the blather. Let me move on to a strategy. Now, you know we're doing interpersonal skills, and I ran through Dear Man and I ran through the fast skills. So I'm going to come back in slow motion to Dear Man. Thank you for your patience. And this should be pretty short because I've been going a bit long on the strategies recently, but you don't mind. Just tell me that. Make me happy. Okay, but I want to cruise back. Dear Man is how you say what you want. And this is universal. If I'm in the middle of a debate, in a public debate, this is how I would say what I want. If I'm asking somebody to give me something, this is how I say what I want. People get this wrong all the time. The master of the intentional Dear Man foul-up is, of course, Donald Trump. Trump doesn't follow these rules, and by not following these rules, he uses emotion, and if you're easily persuaded by emotion over logic, and apparently a lot of people are, that looks good to you. And yeah, there is no denying that you can misrepresent and use emotion over logic. It's true, and people will go for it. However, this is not developed as a skill for bamboozling, lying, or misrepresenting. This is actually a skill developed for people who constantly feel as though they don't succeed with communication. And so it takes you back to the basics of how we get a point across. If you want to be a virtuoso liar, you have to learn this first so you understand how you're lying. I'm going to assume nobody here wants to be. Okay, so we're looking at Dear Man, and we're looking at the D as in describe. This is key. It's first for a reason. When you fail to get a point across, often it is because you jumped ahead, because you did not say clearly what you want in a structured way. If you want to hear the person who does this brilliantly, listen to Barack Obama. Obama got teased a lot because he did these long speeches, but Obama is actually great on structure. If you listen to him, he starts every speech in this very pragmatic way. He says, I'm Barack Obama, blah, blah, and here's what I'm going to tell you today. And he'll give you the outline, covering every salient point in his speech. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. If you are an English professor, as I have been, and you are teaching writing, you're going to find your students get this wrong all the time. Now, there is a hidden thing here, and that is, who's your audience? When I'm going to describe what I want, my audience does have to be able to understand it. So the first mistake you get is people don't describe what they want. They say one little detail and they assume everybody else should just get it intuitively. That doesn't work. When in doubt, spell it out with painful slowness. When I used to write reports for the state of California when I was a qualified medical evaluator, that was the lesson I learned in spades from the brilliant guy who trained me. He would write these 75-page reports. Lawyers would write letters saying, well, you skipped this information. And my friend would just go, no, I didn't, page 26. That he had so much detail, and he would repeat over and over if he had to. Why? Because his audience were lawyers. Often they didn't understand what he was saying. We're interpreting from psychological testing and forensic science to law specialists. They don't know that stuff. They're not required to. They used to show up at our trainings when I was a QME because they were trying to understand our reports. I really respected that in them. But you have to be fair that often when you're asking for something, the other person has to interpret. They don't have your body of knowledge about what you're saying. So the first mistake you get is people do not simply spell out, here's what I'm looking for. Here are my major points. Here is the point of my speech. Here is the methodology I will use to prove my argument. In English land, that is English lit and composition land, we were encouraged to be creative and talk about our real selves. Let me tell you how many good research papers have been shot down by that. When you submit a proposal, when you start any kind of spoken presentation, you want to be direct, clear, and to the point. No purple prose, no extra language, okay? And the second mistake people make, they don't think who they're talking to. So if I'm telling my kid why he should go to school, and I'm talking about his future in college and all that, that's great if he's 17. However, if he's 7, he should probably go to school because the teacher's giving out Halloween candy today. He doesn't care about college. He's not even abstract enough to think that far in advance. Most 7-year-olds. Okay. So please, when you're going to do describe, number 1, spell it out clearly, pedantically. Number 2, think of who your audience is. If you are shooting over the head of your audience because that feeds your ego, congratulations, you're not going to get what you want. So that is the D in Dear Man, the careful, logical description that is suited to a specific audience. And yes, if you've ever taught English composition, that's the first lesson. Consider your audience. Now, if you look at the ACT hexagon, which I have in there, what does that actually do on the ACT hexagon? Well, for one thing, it's staying in the present. You're being very realistic. Here I am, here's who I'm talking to. So that's groundedness in the present. So if I go into a room and I talk like I'm giving a presentation to a bunch of Stanford professors, I'm in the past. I haven't been to Stanford in a long time. Okay, so I'm being very clear and I'm being in the present. Also, it's acceptance that I'm dealing with this as the situation as it is. I'm taking committed action. I am saying what I need to say to a specific audience. Okay, so there you go. Those of you who like the psychological flexibility hexagon, there you go. The Ukraine, it's still out there. Please help those people. I keep carrying the links on my colleagues page on Facebook. We have a colleague friend, and she and her elderly colleague are in Kyiv, and they're hanging in there, and we're all kind of hanging on for their posts to make sure they're okay. It's very real. We're getting used to it. We're getting hardened. Like, you remember the beginning of the quarantine when 40 people died in one day in LA County and we were upset and shut everything down? And now we don't even blink when twice that number go. Yeah, it is really difficult not to get hardened to the harsh realities of our world. This is why the CDC just told us all, if you're under the age of 60, to get screened for anxiety, because we're looking around and we're thinking, this looks crazy. Why is nobody else upset? Hint, we are. Try not to get hardened. You think you're having a bad day? Try living in Kyiv. So if you'd like to donate, there are some links. In the meantime, and yes, I'm not excluding other horrible situations in the world. You know, my thoughts and prayers are with the women of Iran. But in the meantime, on to the fluffy books. So they're not so fluffy anymore. I'm looking into the textbook for a biological psychology course. Problem for that is they want me to take Psych 101. No. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I get around that one? This would just be 1 month of frantically reading the textbook. For me, it's a 6-hour course, and I could probably take it from somebody very famous. But I thought, why not? It'll get me just another class to keep me going for a month between the fall and spring terms. I can't register yet for the spring, but I'm looking at Sign 102, which is, again, just the second half of high school signing. But the nice thing, after Sign 102, I can start taking the really interesting stuff like finger spelling and all that. Okay. But anyway, so you will see textbooks there. One of them is The Introduction to American Deaf Culture by Thomas Holcomb, which I highly recommend. Holcomb is the deaf son of deaf parents, and he's been immersed in the culture. He's now a university professor, and he's worth reading and listening to. He's written several books on a more personal level about what it's like to be deaf, but Introduction to American Deaf Culture is almost universally accepted as the textbook on that subject. I'm also still reading The Sign for Home by Blair Fell. It took a left turn into pretty good. I thought, okay, it's a romance novel, and in the end, these two guys are going to get together. It did a lot more than that, and hasn't done that, actually. And I really am impressed. Fell is not an interpreter, as far as I can tell. He's not deaf. He certainly did his homework. And he manages to create situations in the novel that really let a hearing reader, or in my case, a hearing listener, I've been listening to it on Audible, he's giving us the chance to really get how bad accessibility can be and why it's just a humane decision to increase the level of accessibility for the deaf and the deaf-blind. It's really amazing. And he gets to places where he talks about, oh, look, it's another hearing person doing this ridiculous thing. And after you stop cringing because you know you've done it, of course, I don't know how many deaf people I actually even met until I started seeing deaf patients a few years ago. That's how invisible deaf culture can be. So, and that's what he's talking about, is why is this so invisible? It's not that small a group. Additionally, the one thing you really get out of this book is how all your kids should be learning ASL. It comes up over and over again that ASL is just useful. And his protagonist is deaf-blind. So he's using a thing called tactile ASL, and yeah, Fell even tells you the most recent developments on that, which is astonishing. So all ASL is not the same. There is ASL for the sighted versus ASL for the deaf-blind. It's pretty amazing. The experience is pretty amazing, and I've learned an enormous amount. And again, a hearing guy writing about the deaf and half the book from a deaf perspective, I don't know, but I'm impressed. I don't know if he should do it, but I'm impressed. The only glitch in the book is when he represents deaf people speaking to each other, they speak pidgin English. He is translating ASL very literally into English, but in an ASL word order. This would be like I'm writing a novel of the Second World War, and I write some of it from the perspective of the Germans, even sympathetic Germans, like the generals trying to kill Hitler, you know, and I make them speak German in German word order, but in a pidgin English. Like, I feel like deaf people do not experience their speech. Me, no, I want this. Why? I see blah, blah, blah. I really think, I can't say how deaf people think about ASL, because I speak English and I think in English if I use words at all. And I'm assuming deaf people, when they're thinking, if they're going to use a language, they're thinking in sign. But again, a lot of my thoughts don't have words. So that's my only glitch, is I feel as if when he represents a deaf person speaking ASL, he should just have him speak smoothly. And I find that kind of annoying, but I see why he's doing it, but I don't know how I'd feel if I was deaf and reading this. At any rate, it's a good book and it's interesting. I am staggering through the Beatrice Hyde Clare series because I got sucked into deaf culture books. but those are still good. The link is there. The link to the free textbook on cultural anthropology is there. I'm a little intimidated about taking that because it sounds so work intensive, whereas the biological psych doesn't sound as intensive. These are 4-week courses, so it's intense no matter what I do. I also have just started a book called Deaf Again by Mark Drolsbaugh. It's a very interesting book. He grows up in Philadelphia. He's hearing and he becomes deaf, but he's put through the grinder of, no, you really should be hearing. We're going to fix you. So it takes poor little Mark, it's his autobiography, a long time to realize, no, actually, he's going to be deaf and he should learn ASL and fit into deaf culture. This is Drolsbaugh writing autobiographically, and I don't know if he intended it to become a textbook, but it has, because it's very informative about the struggle for a child who's deaf or becomes deaf to figure out what exactly everybody expects of him, because the school districts are often demanding that he mimic a hearing child instead of using ASL and or an interpreter, or both, and being deaf. And so the struggles of being the deaf kid in the hearing classroom, the deaf kid who didn't go to deaf school, all of that is in there. I will add the link to the notes. It's fascinating, and it's become a textbook, so it's overpriced. But I would search it on all the used book sites you can find. A used copy is just fine for it. It's very readable. He's very compelling and a very good writer. So that is Deaf Again by Mark Drolsbaugh. I'm really at the start. I'm about 5 chapters in. Very, very good. Something I really like. Did I mention I really like voting? Getting sick of it, please vote. What else do I really like this week? Well, the cat brush, but I'll come back to it. Put a lid on it, not really, but in the blather, it happened. I chatted. I went to a deaf event at a local Topper's Pizza, and I spoke. Or rather, I signed. Just a little bit to a deaf person, sadly mostly to other students who were there, but I took pictures and I signed. And you know what happened? It was mind-blowing. On the night, I felt anxious and nervous, and I crept up to this woman who looked like she was about my age, who I'd seen at previous functions, and I know she's deaf. And I just asked her, did you make your beautiful Ruana? And she said, no, I bought it. And I said, it's just lovely. And she smiled and said, thank you. And I ran away shyly. And I went back and hid among the ASL students. Most of the students there were in ASL 102, which was good for me to see because, frankly, they didn't speak much better than I do. So that was encouraging. So you think, well, that's not much. I mean, hardly did anything. No. I came home and some invisible switch inside me was thrown. I saw my deaf patient. We had a new interpreter, and I was just talking right along with him. I was commenting, answering questions. I suddenly realized I can do this. And my deaf patient was talking back to me, and at times she was rolling her eyes up so as not to look at me because she's focused on the interpreter. We had a really good interpreter. The interpreter, I saw her at the moment where she realized I have some ASL, so she was talking to me, and it was a very 3-way conversation. It was very, very exciting and wonderful, and I have been just riding this sense of competence all week long, and I suddenly looked and said, well, we only have another few weeks of class. We're at week 11, and I just realized that's it. I'm there. I've actually done well. I'm getting it. I feel very uncertain about taking 102. I'm very nervous because I have to meet with the teacher to talk about telling a story in sign, and I have to meet with her and just talk to her in sign for the final. I'm very excited, I'm very scared, I'm very nervous, but I'm always looking up new words. I'm always trying to say new things. Wow. So apparently I can do this. And I finally chatted with a deaf person, however briefly. On the pup date, well, the dogs are more indoors because now we're getting slightly cooler into the 60s and 50s, and certainly at night it's in the 40s. And so I've measured them for the inevitable training collars, the choke chains as they used to be called, because really it's time to just get them to move well on a leash. It is getting to be time to get them their shots. Blankets has been retired. She's old, she's really old. She seems to be doing fine. She's very communicative. She comes and talks to me every day. The month without the boys helped her because she's a little intimidated by them. And then she realized she misses them. And so it's very funny that she's very happy that they're back. She's still rude to them. Meanwhile, the hub state, he's doing well. His eyes are great. Everything is holding out well. On the calendar, Stitches SoCal, November 11th through 13th, 2022 in Pasadena at the Convention Center. I will be there on the Sunday, the 13th. I don't think I'm going to be there any longer than that because of the temptation level. I am so happy just using up my yarn. I am so happy. I don't want to buy yarn. However, last time I did things like Western Sky had, was it Western Sky? Yeah, it was. They just had random skeins on sale that were extras and all that. And I bought those and made hats. And I'm looking at one of them. It's just gorgeous. And it's blues and grays and blacks and white. There's a little orange. That may get into the Romule because I think the Romule this year is going to be blue themed out of my blue scraps. We shall see. Grand Canyon, we are on for the Grand Canyon on June 5th through 9th, 2023. Sunnybank, maybe August 17th through 21st. And yes, Romule this year between Christmas and New Year's. I will be taking Romule. Minerva gets the last word, grooming. So I was watching a cat video about things you really should do for your cat that your cat just loves. It was some random nonsense site. It wasn't somebody like Cat Daddy. And they said, you should get a brush and groom your cats. And I thought about my late beloved Guinevere, who used to love being groomed. She had a lot of Persian in her. And she had beautiful soft fur, and she just would go insane when I picked up a brush with happiness. So I pulled out this little cat brush we've had forever that I got years ago for, I think, Fearless. And I pulled it out, and I started grooming Minerva. I wasn't expecting this. I think she thinks it's her boyfriend, and she's trying to make out with it. So I have pictures of Minerva trying to make out with her hairbrush. She just goes crazy for it. That she will let me brush her, and then she turns around and bites it and nuzzles it and marks it. She's like, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. That is my brush. You should use it on me all the time. And that's how I got the fur to spin. That now Minerva keeps creeping into my room, and at every chance she jumps in my lap and she looks longingly at the little pink kitty brush. So there we are. Minerva gets the last word. It's, oh, baby, groom me. She is so happy. The purrs are rip snorting loud. She is so happy. So there we go. 102. That was fast and lovable. It is Halloween. I actually do have class tonight, but the teacher said she doesn't care if we miss. I'm debating. I'm half an hour out, so I have to start practicing for the warm-up. But in the meantime, everybody, please remember all the COVID safety stuff. Please remember all the flu, the pneumonia, the shingles, all that nice junk. Get it all done. It's not that hard. It's not a big deal. Just get it all done, and we're going through the winter. And please remember we are a community. That I have patients who can't get COVID shots, and they're so scared that they're having wild anxiety. Please remember those people. Please remember it's not about you having some sort of individual freedom to get any illness you want. It's about we protect the weak and the helpless. We protect children. We protect babies. We protect pregnant women. We protect cancer victims. We protect the elderly. Please remember we are communal. We are not individualistic. No society has ever survived by being individualistic. Trust me. Go read your anthropology. So remember, we're going to stay safe because we're going to take care of each other. And I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.